just start with going over some of the housekeeping issues. We'll rotate the answers or the questions each time around. Ashley in the front row will be doing the timing. We'll do 3 minutes for introductions, 2 minutes for answers. And then how do you feel about taking a 5-minute break at 10:25, 10:30? Is that okay?
Super.
Sure.
Okay. And then 2 or 3 minutes for closing. We'll see how we're going for time. Camera's over there, so if you want to address your answers to the question, or to the audience rather than me, it'll probably look a little bit better that way. Questions before we start? Okay. Well, welcome. My name's Jolene Gardy. I'm a board member at the League of Women Voters. I'd like to welcome everyone to the second of 4 forums for Fargo area legislators. Thank the legislators for joining us today. I'd also like to thank the City of Fargo for allowing us to hold the forum here, and Jeremy, who runs the mics and the cameras, and Cable One as well. The forum is being broadcast on public access, and the video will also be posted on the League of Women Voters website at a later date. The forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters, which is a nonpartisan national organization that encourages informed and active citizens to participate in government and focuses on educating citizens. For the audience, if you have questions, there are white note cards and you can give them to Bev or Les to bring up. We will try to cover everything, and we may combine some questions if there are a number on the same topic. You can also ask a question to a specific legislator. We'll give all of them the chance to answer, but that's an option as well. Okay, I think that's it. We'll start with opening statements and 3 minutes. Representative Beadle, if you would like to start, please.
Is this on? All right. I'll keep it short because I know you all have quite a bit of questions to ask, but my name is Thomas Beadle, representative from District 27. I serve alongside Randy Baining, who's my other House counterpart, as well as Senator Spencer Berry. I was elected in 2010, so I'm in my second legislative session right now. I currently am serving on the Industry, Business, and Labor Committee, as well as the Political Subdivisions Committee. We've been doing quite a bit of work on behalf of the citizens, and hopefully we're coming up with some good results that everyone appreciates. I'll keep this short and move on and get to the questions, but just want to thank the League of Women Voters and thank you, Jolene, for having us here, and looking forward to a good discussion today.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you. My name is Ben Hansen. This is my first session in the legislature. I serve in District 16, which is about half Fargo, half West Fargo. Our other representative there is Representative Ben Koppelman, and some guy named Tyler is our senator. I serve on the Judiciary and the Political Subdivisions Committees, and like I said, it's my first session, so I'm still learning and still taking everything in. So I'll look forward to speaking with you all and my fellow reps and senators.
Good morning. I'm Senator Tim Flacco, serving District 44, which is the central part of North Fargo, I guess we've kind of called it that. And also joining us today, I would want to recognize up north is Senator Ron Sorbog, who's been kind enough to join us today. I serve on the Senate Education Committee, where I chair that committee, serve on the Transportation Committee and the Employment Committee. Bills that have been introduced this session include one that passed yesterday for merit scholarships, the bill that passed the day before on higher education funding reform mechanism, one that relates to the humane treatment of animals, and one that also passed this week to prevent those nasty texts that everyone was less than happy about last November, those robo-texts, and some do not call violations too. I think that's all. We'll pass it on.
Thank you.
Hello? Okay, I couldn't tell if I pushed it hard enough either. Good morning. Name is Tyler Axness. I'm a freshman senator for District 16, along with my seatmate Ben Hansen over there. And first session, it's been 34 days, and those 34 days have given us a lot to be happy about, but also a lot to be frustrated about. And you know, it's a long road for a lot of these bills that we'd like to see implemented. A lot of exits possible for dead ends on these roads, but it's been exciting to be a part of the process to help move some of these bills forward and fight for the ones that we'd like to see forward that haven't. You know, I guess it's a long time left. I serve alongside Senator Flacco on the Transportation Committee. Other than that, I am on the Human Services Committee and again on the Employment Committee. And we've seen a lot of good things, and I look forward to the discussion today, and I want to thank the League and all of you for showing up today.
Thank you. Representative Grishella.
Good morning. Ed Grishella. I'm the senior legislator from District 45, which is North Fargo. I serve with, from my district, it's Senator Sorvag is back in the role there, and Joe Heilman is the other representative. So we're kind of a bipartisan district, and that's the way we'd like to see more of that bipartisanship in the legislature. Currently, this is my 4th session. I was elected first in 2006 to the House, and I've served on the same 2 committees since that time. The Transportation Committee and the Industry, Business, and Labor Committee. And I'm also on a really sparkling committee this time called the Committee on Committees. And don't ask about that one. But I'm retired law enforcement, so I focus a lot on some of the transportation issues, and possibly will make some progress in traffic safety this session. I have some hopes. There's a glimmer of light. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The first question will go to Representative Hansen. With multiple drunk driving enforcement bills in the legislature, how is that coming together as crossover approaches?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I don't have all the details on the Senate side, to be honest with you. I haven't been very involved with that bill, just having happened to not be in that chamber. On the Judiciary Committee, we heard quite a bit of testimony. It was about a 2-hour hearing, which is very long for compared to most hearings on most bills, for our new DUI laws there. There are a few key factors that I'd also defer to Representative Grishella because he's actually kind of an expert on, but some of them were the interlock ignition keys that didn't allow you to turn your car on unless you'd blown a sober test. Those were not included in the House version. I can't remember. I don't know if they've survived the Senate version. We have something called the 24/7 program that Attorney General Wayne Stenjum is a big fan of, that I believe both versions of the bill included, which depending on the offense and the amount of times one has offended, driving under the influence, one has to go in and blow a sober test into the local police station for as long as you're allowed to have your license. I know that we've moved towards having mandatory sentencing. I think it's a minimum of 4 days for the first offense, is the way the House version passed it out, with eventually a felony occurring after a few of the offenses. We've passed that bill out of the House now. It's going to appropriations, and in crossover it'll probably be combined with the Senate version. So really it sounds pretty vague, and I'm sorry to be vague, but there's enough moving parts that are going to get changed up during crossover that both the House and the Senate are going to have to re-vote on, that there's no solid answer for exactly what we have right now, but we are moving towards stricter DUI penalties as a result of some of the tragic cases that have happened over the last couple of years, in addition to being kind of an oddity in that we're a state that's increasing in DUI offenses compared to most that are decreasing. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Flacco, or Senator Flacco.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
The bill we had before us was Senate Bill 2240, which I think everyone really liked a lot on the Senate side, and as evidenced by the fact that it passed unanimously in our chamber. It had a number of things that will really make it more, again, about really changing and reforming people's behaviors, and not just penalties. We opted for going with what are called scram bracelets, which are bracelets that are on a person 24/7 after a certain point, after their second offense and beyond. That would allow them to continue to work, continue to do things, and it monitors them every 30 minutes rather than the interlocking devices. There's a few glitches in those in terms of, as we viewed it, if you own multiple vehicles, it creates problems. There's a few things. Essentially, we've doubled fines, we've doubled penalties. Our mandatory jail time starts with a second offense. And also, we put in there some pretty good refusal language. If someone refuses to take the test, then they are deemed to be at the .18 level. We also have higher penalties, as an example, if you're at .18 and above, than if you're at a .08. So, and I'll save some for Senator Axness, who's also on the Transportation Committee that heard the bill. So if I missed something, he can chime in, I guess.
Thank you, Senator Axon.
Well, thank you, Senator Flacco. Before he got to speak, I whispered, please don't take all the points for this. As I am right now, I actually sit next to Senator Flacco in our Transportation Committee, and we heard very detailed testimony on this bill, very moving testimony. So, you know, I think we've been mandated to act on this, and that's what we were elected to do. And Senator Flacco did a great job covering a majority of what our bill does. We did also increase the accountability limit. Currently, right now, after 5 years, some of the charges are dropped. We increased that to 7. The jail time, we heard a lot of concern from the correctional department that our jails are already overcrowded, so we're looking on ways to implement perhaps some treatment facilities as an option instead of jail time. But you know, Senator Flacco talked about the 24/7 sobriety with the Scram bracelets. I have seen a picture of those things, and you will not be taking that thing off. It's a pretty sturdy bracelet that I think is going to be very effective. But I guess what I'll add is I think that we can be doing more to prevent this dire situation in the first place. You know, we've heard a number of bills in my Human Services Committee and have been to the floor that would put more money into youth prevention, underage drinking programs. Unfortunately, this session, the Senate did not act on that, but I think moving forward, that's something we can hopefully do.
Thank you, Representative Grishella.
Thank you. When I started working on the DUI issue last summer, I was contacted by Lynn Mickelson, who was the father of the Deutscher woman that was killed in that crash by Jamestown, and also Bob Hunsker, Representative Hunsker from up at Bottineau. It's his district where those 2 young boys were run over in the tent by a drunk driver. So we were contacted, and there were some others too that were interested and thought this was the time to maybe make some progress. So, and also Senator Mathern from Fargo here started working on the issue also. Anyway, we put together all our ideas into one bill, and decided we put it in the Senate side because we didn't know there was a bill in the House side at that point. Legislative Council didn't know about a bill being drafted in the House. So we thought we were going to put together a bipartisan bill on this, but unfortunately it turned out there's 2 bills, one in the Senate, one in the House, and they've both been amended considerably, and based on what I think is a false assumption, and that is that we have to make concessions for drunk drivers because we don't want to hit them too hard because everybody's can make a mistake. That's the feeling, but 2/3 of the drunk drivers are first-time offenders. So the after treatment and putting that type of thing is good for the second and third timers, but it does nothing to prevent the first-time offenders. And many of those turn out to be second and third timers. So our emphasis was more on trying to prevent the first timer, and that's why we put in the really high penalties for first-time offenders. That has since been amended because, like everything, in order to get something passed, it gets watered down. But there will be some progress this time, but I don't think it'll be all that I'd hoped for. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Beadle.
Thank you, Julian. As the other members of the Senate and the House have mentioned, we've got a couple different bills that we're debating. Senate Bill 2240, House Bill 1302 is the House counterpart to that one that was introduced by Representative Kim Koppelman. So we're at the halfway point. Obviously, stuff's going to come out a little different than it's at right now. So everything we're talking about right now is kind of our goal, what we'd like to see. But just so you know, there's still things that are going to be tinkered with it. I mean, obviously, we're all aware of the problem. There was the family that very publicly lost their life from West Fargo due to DUI, as well as many other areas across the state. We've had issues with driving under the influence. And Representative Grishella is right. I mean, most of them are first-time offenders, but the first time is really all it takes a lot of times. However, some of the mandatory penalties that we're talking about have some hesitation because when you're looking at mandating jail time and you're mandating really, really stiff penalties, then you also have to look at the other side of it as how do you actually enforce that. And one of the problems that we're having across the state is constraints on our jails. The city of Williston's already outgrown their jail. Burley and Morton County have come to us asking to be change to being home rule charter because they need to greatly expand their jail facilities. So what we're looking at is how do we best change people's mindset and change their mentality? And there's a difference between retribution and rehabilitation. And just putting someone in jail doesn't necessarily mean that they get the treatment or get the knowledge and information to actually change their habits. And that's where Attorney General Wayne Stenjum's 24/7 program, as well as the Scram Bracelet program that's part of the Senate bill, really has substantial benefits that actually have been proven to change behavior. That if an individual is drinking heavily, then it actually adjusts their behavior long term, as opposed to them being in jail for 4 days and then going right back to drinking in excess. So we're looking at a few different options as far as really changing and substantially changing the outcomes and the behaviors of the state. And so we'll definitely be addressing the issue, but there are some things that are still going to be worked out.
Thank you. The next question goes to Senator Flackel. We're going to kind of combine two on higher ed. Please describe your views on the role of the legislature in managing the North Dakota higher ed system, and how is the newer funding model going to impact colleges in our area?
Well, thank you. Next, we were just talking. Yeah, we were just talking over here. I said, "My luck, I'll get a House bill today." You know, some that is more remote because we have a little trouble with that. Always figuring out what's in other chambers. In terms of the higher education funding mechanism, pardon me, it essentially was put together by finance officers from 4 campuses that represent 2, 4, and research campuses, and it essentially rewards 4 completed courses. I think it will have the potential to be one that could be adopted by many states. It pays more for those courses that are more costly to deliver. So if you have an efficient course where you can have 120 students in the classroom, say they would be at this level, and then if you have a more expensive program like a nursing program, which has required smaller class sizes of 12, like 12 to 1, has more costly lab equipment, you pay additional funds for those. And the funds follow the student as they complete those courses. So it's about matriculating those students so they graduate in a more timely basis. It's about rewarding campuses for encouraging them to participate more quickly. There's a campus size factor that plays into it, so they get a little additional money, and an efficiency factor, much like we have in K-12 schools. In terms of the relationship between higher education and the system office, the board, and the legislature, that certainly has been a point of discussion, and actually one that is coming up rather quickly this morning, where the North Dakota Student Association are discussing that, and that will be played out. I believe soon there will be a resolution on the House side to look at how or if we should continue to have a board and in what manner, but certainly the legislature is the appropriators of those funds, and we have certain expectations that are associated with those. And they come to us all the time with bills that they wish to have passed. So there is a need for a collegial atmosphere in an imperfect world so that we can have a very vibrant higher education system.
Thank you. Senator Axness.
Thank you. Kind of following up on what Senator Flackel just closed with, we need to find ways to get the controversy out of our current higher ed system. It seems like every other month or every year there seems to be something that's drawing attention to the negative impacts. And frankly, I think we have a decent system the way it is. I mean, we're putting out good students with a high level of knowledge that are in high demand across the nation. Everybody wants a student that graduated from a North Dakota university or college. I think the new funding formula is a good step in the right direction. We've all heard about the inequitable funding that is going on, especially when it relates to the university in this town. Nothing against Valley City, but they were receiving sometimes double what NDSU was per student. And it was causing some troubles for the students when they would have to voluntarily increase their own tuition by 8% like they did a couple years ago. So I'm happy with this new funding formula. I think it's going to do great things. We're working on ways to increase scholarships based on merit and based on financial need. And all this is going to help our North Dakota students achieve success here in North Dakota.
Thank you. Representative Grishella.
Thank you. Higher ed seems to be kind of the whipping boy here the last few sessions. And we just can't seem to figure out how to balance the Board of Higher Ed with the chancellor and the college presidents. So there's been a lot of controversy. However, in the end, it seems like we, as mentioned, we seem to turn out a good product here in the state. Our children are well educated in the higher ed system. The funding isn't equitable. NDSU has been, has been on the lower end of receiving funding just because of the way that formula works. So I think this new formula that Senator Flacco's been working on is a step in the right direction. And I just hope that, all this controversy will end up improving the system. And I really don't like the movement now of trying to, the colleges are all having these, the votes for, to see if he should, if the chancellor should be retained. It seems like, he came in with some good ideas and tried to implement them, and now it's turned back on him. But anyway, I think the formula funding, the change will be a good thing.
Thank you, Representative Beadle.
Yeah, thank you. In regards to the higher ed funding formula, the current formula that's been in existence obviously has some inequity to it, and part of that's caused by the fact that the university system in the tower, as we like to call them, they've got this funding mechanism, but nobody really knows how it's going to play out until you get to the very end and the dollars are expended. But one of the things that we found from it over the last few years, for example, is NDSU, who has the highest enrollment, is getting only $4,900 per student, which is the second lowest in our system. They also have the highest number of actual students with a butt in the seat, which is more expensive to teach than somebody who's going online. By comparison, like has been mentioned, Valley City State, which has one of the lower enrollments in our state, has $9,300 per individual, per student. And they have significantly less people in the seat. So the new funding formula, as decided by all the business offices, or the business offices that were all part of it, will create a lot more inequity and make sure that you're actually reimbursed for the actual cost of educating the student, because there's different means of educating the student, and this will adjust more accordingly to the costs associated with the program. So it's going to be a better funding formula overall. In terms of the role of the legislature, obviously, higher ed, Board of Higher Ed has been very contentious and a big issue. But one thing that everyone needs to remember is, yes, we have the Board of Higher Education to look at the actual policies and the framework and how we want the system to go. And they serve a purpose there. They serve a great role there. Our model is similar to many other states' models, and we studied some of those during the interim. Senator Flacco and I serve on the Interim Higher Education Committee. We had individuals coming from Tennessee telling us about their model, and some other states as well. But all the money flows through the legislature. We have the purse strings. So whenever there's issues that are out there, we need to make sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpayer money. So as a legislature, we do have a job to hold the board and hold the system accountable, because we're the ones that are putting the public's money into these systems.
Thank you, Representative Hansen.
Thank you. Frankly, I don't have too much new to say after five other folks, so I try not to be repetitive. I do want to try and move, however I can help, towards a more equal funding for our universities, especially with our big one here in town, not maybe getting quite the same amount of dollars per student as the other ones. So I do think the new funding formula, I'd just like to concur with my fellow panelists, is a good idea. It gets us closer to equalization. It's a better model for the merit of funds per student. Of course, we don't know the exact final version, so I'll be paying close attention to that. As far as the legislature's relationship with the Higher Ed Board, it is my first session. I don't serve on the Education Committee. That said, I did have a chance to sit down with our new chancellor, and there's been a lot of contention based around that and a lot of controversy based around him as Chancellor Shervani as a person and the Higher Ed Board as an entity. I think the chancellor sort of views himself as almost a personal trainer, if you will, telling the state system that it needs to diet and exercise, and the only reason you're complaining right now is because I'm trying to make you better, and you're going to feel better after I get done with you. And I think there are feelings on the other side that he's being abrasive, or in some cases it feels like it's not being as publicly, his job is not being done in the light of the public as much as it should be, like the incidents up at UND. So there's been some pushback and forth. I know Senator Grinberg's put in an amendment for a potential buyout that's gotten a lot of press attention. It hasn't made it over to the House side, and we'll see if that actually even gets passed in the Senate. But however we can, and hopefully the new funding formula is part of it, I like to make sure that both the higher ed board and the legislature are getting along as much as possible to the benefit of the students, because at the end of the day, hopefully we don't focus too much on the political games, and we just focus on the results. And I think my fellow panelists basically stated that pretty well for me, so thanks.
All right, thank you. The next question goes to Senator Axness. We have a few on the FM diversion, so I'm going to try to combine a couple. The first asks for everyone's position on the diversion, and then the second one specifies a bill, House Bill 1210. It says, seeks to damage the Red River diversion by requiring local jurisdictions to pay school tax forever on flood buyouts retroactive to 2011. And also, what's your position on this bill?
Okay, well, in the Senate, it is kind of hard to address House bills just because I haven't had the chance to have the hearing on those. I think it's been apparent over the past decade that some sort of protection needs to be done for the city of Fargo. You know, we can't continue to spend millions upon millions of dollars every other year fighting a flood and losing revenue and losing the potential for new businesses to come to the state because of the threat of losing either their house or their place of business. I'm in support of the Fargo flood diversion. I believe the House might have actually acted on that yesterday. I'm not positive, but my understanding, it's a good bill, and it passed in a way that is going to benefit, hopefully, the potential construction of a flood diversion. I'm happy that an amendment that was drafted by the House Majority Leader was not accepted in committee. That would have prevented state funds from going to the construction of that diversion. I think that's a big step. I'm glad the committee had a better judgment on the use for those funds. And I look forward to having that hearing and seeing that bill over in the Senate side with the intent to finally move forward on this project that has languished for a very long time.
Thank you, Representative Kurshella.
We, I think it was 2 days ago, the Weather Service upgraded our flood percentage from 6% to 79%. So we're going to be, you know, in that same boat again this spring, wondering if we're going to float away or not. So obviously, you know, we have to do something. I do have some friends from down the southern part of the district, the water district, and they do have some legitimate complaints, Oxbow and Hickson. I have a friend down there who has a farm that's been there in his family for a couple hundred years, never been flooded, and now he will be behind that, what he calls the Fargo Dam. And so I really empathize with those people down there, but when we look at the big picture, you know, we have to do permanent flood protection here, and the diversion, unless somebody's got a better idea, that is the thing we have to get done. It's expensive, but it will fix our flooding and will protect the complete city of Fargo. So I guess there's no other direction but you know, go full force forward on that. And we're pretty confident that statewide we would get the funding if we ever get that bill through. So we will get the funding on the state level. And then it'll be up to the locals and the federal government to come through with the rest. So it's a good project, and I like the latest adjustments that were made, moving the diversion a little bit further north. I think it takes, I think I read now there's only about 10,000 actual acres that would be affected on the other side of that, on the other side of the dam, as they call it. So it's got down there, it protects our areas, and it leaves some growth for Fargo, so it's a good plan.
Thank you, Representative Beadle.
Thank you. I've just been trying to quickly read through House Bill 1210, which has just been passed out of the Finance and Taxation Committee. We haven't gotten it on the floor of the House yet, but I expect that we'll have it within the next few days. And just to back up for just in general my position on the FM diversion, I'd like to state that the legislature as a whole is committed towards flood protection and providing permanent flood protection. The city of Fargo has been actively increasing the levees within the city limits to make sure that we're protected to 42.5 feet, to ensure that our citizens are protected. Because even if we start the diversion tomorrow, it's not going to be done tomorrow. It's going to be done 10 years from now. So I mean, it's a lengthy process. It's a lengthy project, and it's been studied for many years now. I mean, if you remember, it really, a lot of attention really began on this project after this spring of '09 when we had the massive flood there that really had some issues within our city. And I remember Ben and I would go out and be sandbagging until 2 in the morning during that, and we want to try to make it so that that doesn't happen again. And the diversion, as is planned and as has been adjusted, like Representative Crushella stated, to encompass more area protected within that diversion, is been thoroughly thought out, been thoroughly vetted. It's not perfect. It's not going to necessarily be the absolute end result, but a diversion similar to that needs to happen. If you look at a city like Winnipeg, after their diversion, they were able to sustain consistent economic growth. Similar with West Fargo, after they had the Cheyenne River diversion, they were able to have a boom of economic growth. You really need to have that assurance, that protection, in order for anything to really allow for the continuation of growth. Otherwise, we can see a stagnant. In regards to House Bill 1210, we do need to make sure that the school districts remain adequately funded even after the homes are bought out. Otherwise, we could see a situation similar to Devil's Lake, where as water continues to take away the tax base, then the political subdivisions there are going to start to suffer because they no longer have that revenue. I don't know if 1210 is absolute perfect legislation, but it's definitely a good start to make sure that the political subdivisions maintain their steady flow of cash.
Thank you, Representative Hansen.
Thank you. I don't know, I kind of had some fun throwing sandbags. Maybe we should just keep going. No, I'm just kidding. And maybe I shouldn't make light when people's property is on the line, because it's been probably the #1 issue that's most talked about here in Fargo-Moorhead. I obviously concur with my fellow panelists and most in the state legislature that we are committed to a more permanent solution to flood protection for the larger FM area, and I really do sympathize with downstream interests and a lot of folks that are closer to farmland who kind of feel maybe a little more put out by this and how we can make this a more fair process. Speaking to this specific bill, 1210, I as well was just paging through it here, and I am certainly supportive of it in concept. Basically what it does is allows us to make payments on the state level for local taxes that would have been paid towards the school district here. I know, well, even within the last year, Minot lost quite a bit in sales taxes, not the same thing, but it affected their local municipality and their ability to fund many of their local governments. I think it's a good idea to be prepared and be proactive instead of reactive for something that we know has happened and frankly would probably might happen again even this spring. You know, it's not outside the realm of possibilities. I do want to get the testimony on it, see who would testify against it, what the adverse effects are. Something I've learned as a freshman is a lot of things seem very good on the face of it, making up taxes here on the state level when we have some billions of dollars of surplus to make sure that we offset this without it being a convoluted process and make sure our basic economic engines are flowing. Sounds pretty good here, but something I've come to learn is when something sounds good, you'll have 2 or 3 people come in and testify against it occasionally. Then you'll realize that if you support this, you'll put half the county workers in the state out of work all of a sudden without having realized the consequence. And you go, oh, all right, I guess I'll take a little, maybe we'll either amend this or I won't support this or we'll take a different look at it. This looks to be a good bill. I see some of the names on here are from Cass County and some of the very smart members with the legislature. I'm sure they had nothing but good intent, so I'll probably be supporting it depending on if I don't hear anything that stands out as being negative.
Thank you. Senator Flacco.
Well, again, we haven't seen this one on the Senate side, and I'm not sure if we will. Who knows? But I think we have to also look at it in terms of the historical context of it. Did we pay for other homes in Cass County or in Fargo when they were taken down? In my district, which is right along the Red River, we had many homes and buildings taken out. And to my knowledge, and I think Jim Johnson was in here, I'm not sure if from the school board, if we did anything to remediate that. At one time, I think we were at a meeting here that was hosted by Fargo Cass, West Fargo. I think they were talking $70,000 for the one school district, which isn't a significant amount of money in terms of their overall budget. And I think if we do happen to pass the major education funding bill, House Bill 1319, that would really remove the need for this bill. Particularly, we don't want to have individual silos where they get all sorts of different but sources of income that add beyond the funding mechanism. So, and then just to add, last night, I visited with Representative Thorson this morning. They had the water bill in front of them. They passed it out of committee up to $320 million for the diversion, excuse me, the diversion. But interestingly enough, with no ring dikes in it, we're permitted. So we're a long way from home on that bill. I think, you know, that one will change as we move forward, and I would see a lot of changes that would probably occur to that on the Senate side in terms of, as an example, the ring dikes and stuff, which I think has a pretty broad base of support. So everyone wants to, I think on this panel, wants to really do something significant to protect business and homes. No doubt about it.
All right, thank you. The next question is for Representative Grishella, and this is actually aimed at the representatives, but senators, you're welcome to respond as well. It lists House Bill 1414. It says, would have tied minimum wage to inflation. What is your position on this bill? And it also says, please explain why the bill was killed in committee.
Well, thank you. We've heard this bill several sessions that I've been in, raising the minimum wage or tying it to the CPI. But there just doesn't seem to be, I mean, I supported the bill. I think minimum wage is, you know, it's been fixed, for about 12 years since it's been raised. And if I recall the testimony, there were actually 6,000 people in North Dakota that are at minimum wage, which was controversial. In testimony on the floor, we heard that there weren't that many North Dakotans at minimum wage, but there's quite a few. And the arguments against it were that the same arguments that you know, it's up to the business person to decide what he wants to pay, and also that it may hurt some businesses in small towns and that type of thing. But you know, if you're at minimum wage, and we heard the calculations, you're fairly certain to be on some sort of government subsistence of some sort. So, you know, maybe if we paid a little more, we pay people less money on different social programs. So I think it's time for a raise in that bill, and I did support it.
Thank you. Representative Beadle.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, minimum wage is a big issue, and as we had heard during both committee testimony as well as on the floor, Tony Weiler, the head of the North Dakota Department of Labor, testified saying that there's about 6,000 employees at minimum wage. That number is accurate, and about 4,000 below minimum wage. But those are obviously the tipped employees, more the servers that have tips in order to adjust for the fact to bring them up above that number. The biggest opposition to it is, one, minimum wage was increased June 24th, 2009. That's where it set minimum wage at the current level we're at right now of $7.25 an hour, which, granted, is not a whole lot of money. And there are certainly some issues that we need to work on to make sure that people are able to have a living wage, but for the most part, the market has dictated that. I mean, if you drive around Minot, North Dakota right now, and obviously they're a boom area, like I was doing for work, to be a delivery driver at Papa John's, they had $13.50 an hour starting, plus tips, plus a signing bonus after a certain period of time. And obviously that's Minot's a certain extenuating circumstance, but in some of these larger cities, you're not finding as many people at minimum wage. It's more of the rural areas where the market doesn't necessarily support having that much more than minimum wage that you're seeing that sort of price. But really the biggest opposition is the fact that the bill, what 1414 did is it tied it to the CPI, Consumer Price Index. And as our Department of Labor Commissioner stated, that's not a very good inflation indicator. If you're looking at CPI right now, you see ag prices, commodity prices that are inflating this number up. It's not something that's really consistent. You can't really keep a good grasp on it. And so it was just deemed, and the Department of Labor stated, CPI is not the good measure of how we should be adjusting minimum wage. And that was really the opposition that killed the bill.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you. I did wind up supporting the bill on the floor. I was not in the committee meeting. We do have our minimum wage set at the federal level, the 2009 level of $7.25, I believe. And I believe that there's probably going to be an increase on the federal level at some point in the next few years, maybe within the current president's term. I could see that being an agenda item. I do understand the concern with it being based on inflation and what exact inflation we'd be basing it on, and maybe the legislature winds up bringing this up in the next legislative session at a specific dollar amount. I shouldn't just throw out a random dollar amount. I want to get some stats before we actually adjust for it, and to make sure that be an incremental adjustment. I would like to see something that we could do to make this a little bit more popular, maybe on the state level, is use it as Representative Grishel had mentioned. If minimum wage is increased, you're allowing certain folks to have more earning power on their own, and maybe incentivizing them, as Representative Grishel said, off some of the social programs. I'd like to see what all programs they would wind up being taken off of, or how much cost savings that would reflect towards the state and any state assistance programs that we'd have, to make sure that our citizens have as much earning power as possible. As far as some of the boom times we're having, especially out west, I do agree that wages there tend to be much higher than minimum. But at that point, minimum wage bill wouldn't affect you. If we set it at $9 an hour and say Papa John's is paying you $13 an hour, well, this bill passed you right by. You didn't have to do anything. So it's something we should take a look at again next session. Maybe make some adjustments for how we set the increase. And I certainly don't want to be reactive and sit and wait for the federal government. There have been several other states that have done this as well with positive results. So let's take a look at it. I'm just summarize. Let's take a look at it next time.
Thank you, Senator Flacco.
Well, just quickly, I haven't really been a big fan always of these automatic escalators that can go in, because in this case it would reflect, the national, demographic trends, the data from the national government, and what we, have different states that have different economy pockets, and with some of it, and I didn't see the bill, oftentimes it affects seasonality. Those seasonal workers who may be in working for a business that have pretty tight margins, and it may be a situation we have to be careful of, where if they have 10 workers, that they only have so many dollars that they're going to be able to put towards labor, and if they we mandate certain things to them, then they may have to only have 9 or then 8 workers, and that really doesn't serve the purpose.
Thank you, Senator Axness.
Thank you. I don't have a whole lot to add since I didn't hear the bill, but just the general concept of needing to raise the minimum wage, I am very much in support of. Minimum wage $7.25, that buys you 2 gallons of milk right now. You spend an hour to get 2 gallons of milk. So, we are one of the states that has the highest percentage of people needing to work more than one job just to make a livable wage. That's time away from recreational activities, that's time away from your family. So there's a greater cost than just the pocketbook when it comes to the low wage that is currently available. So on surface, I mean, this bill might have not been the right vehicle. Like Representative Hansen said, I think we take another look at this maybe in the next session.
All right, thank you. We'll do one more question before we take a short break, starting with Representative Beadle. If the Milk for Kids bill comes up again, how will you vote, yes or no?
I appreciate that question. And I appreciate it for a few different reasons. One, the Milk for Kids bill has gotten blown out of proportion significantly. And I'd like to state what the bill stated and the way that it was reported in the forum are two different animals. The bill, as it came to the floor of the House, was $1.25 million appropriation, not the $550,000 appropriation that the forum reported. So one, there was a difference there. Two, the night before we ever took a vote on it on the House, a fundraising letter was sent out on behalf of the Dem MPL stating that the Republicans are taking away milk for kids, donate to the Dem MPL so we can stop them. So it was clearly a partisan political issue at the start. And three, not a single child advocacy group, not a single school district, no one supporting these individuals testified in support of the bill. Not a single group. And so the need is obviously not there when we're not seeing that. Now, I'm not going to say that we don't have children that are not getting milk. We don't have children that are coming from disadvantaged families that don't need our assistance. That's absolutely true. There are certainly children that need support. And we're doing that by increasing additional funding towards K-12 education and then allowing the school districts to then address the concerns as they need. As a total, we're going to be spending about $1 billion on K-12 education in the state of North Dakota. This is a few $100 million increase over what we've been spending just even a few years ago. And so we're putting more and more money into the school district's pocketbooks so that they can address the concerns that they have amongst their citizens. But the milk bill as it stood was a partisan issue that was not supported by any child advocacy groups. Not a single person came to support the bill other than the bill sponsor himself. And so with that stated, when we don't see the actual need there for the specific program, then we're going to address it with more broad-based approach, which is the overall increase in funding.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you. I thought it was a decent enough bill when I saw it. I wasn't in committee for it. I voted for it on the floor. I'll probably, I guess I don't know how it would come back to vote again in the session. Maybe I don't understand some of the mechanics of crossover. So if it did, I would probably vote for it again. My understanding was the 1.2 million was, I believe it wasn't accurate due to some way, either the annual or biannual appropriation that they, the bill carrier had asked on the floor that it be sent to appropriations for an adjustment. Probably not the best way of doing that, but frankly, we have many bills that we do that for. We hear a lot of this will be fixed in appropriations or this will be fixed in the Senate. I thought it was a decent program. The details of the program were that federal funding had left for a snack break for some kids. There's about 6,000, I believe, in the state that were affected by it. The state with a large surplus could step in and take up this funding. It's certainly something we could find in the, if the governor's K through 12 budget can possibly survive his own party in appropriations. That's kind of a cheap shot, but it's being looked at now as being severely reduced, but if it's kept at a $500 million level, it's certainly something that we could find funding for in there. As for how, there seems to be a lot of discussion about how it was handled or how it was made, but how it was handled and how it was made. As far as the Fargo Forum reporting it, I mean, I will pass the buck on that. I'm not the Fargo Forum. As far as the fundraising letter goes, I mean, the Dem NPL continues to be a party that supports a free market and asking people for donations for wherever they want to. But I hope it's not viewed as a cheap shot. Simply, issues are dealt with on both sides of the aisle that are asked for fundraising. We on the legislative side aren't responsible for that, but at the same time, I certainly hope we aren't. It's certainly not to be using children as a fundraising tool. It's simply pointing out what's been going on in the state legislature, whether this one was appropriate or not.
Thank you. Senator Flackel.
Well, in that this bill may come before my committee, I'll just offer up a few thoughts in terms of, because normally I don't say pro or con, because if I'm chairing a committee and you come before me and I've already said your bill is going to pass or your bill is going to die, what kind of fair hearing do I run? I would note that when I started, the average per student payment was $1,400, and now we're going to $9,000 this session. 1.8 billion with a B dollars will be likely coming out of this session. I would ask you to contact your local school board members to see what they think, because I certainly got an earful on that. They mentioned the fact that they could have a milk break, but they decided instead to offer breakfast, which includes milk. So from 8 to 8:30-ish, they're having breakfast with milk and other things. Then they have lunch at 11:30, which includes milk. So the question being, and my background is in nutrition, do we really need to provide milk every 90 minutes? Is a question that you may wish to research. Even a 2-week-old calf, they only recommend once every hour. So when we have school children, I'm not sure from a nutritional standpoint, and if you look at the Journal of Pediatrics, they say that 15 minutes of exercise has as much impact on bone density as milk does. So I think, the other thing that's been said, and, really if those that were promoting this would have spent as much time talking to their colleagues on the House side as they did to the media in promoting it, the bill may have passed.
Thank you. Senator Axness.
Well, I was a co-sponsor on that bill. And so, yeah, I was frustrated when I saw the actions taken by the House Education and then the House floor. And, party line votes make things partisan as well, so I will point that out. And we're talking about increasing the state level of funding for children and for schools, but nowhere in there is it saying that a portion of this is going to go to ensure the nutritional aspects, or in this case, milk for students. I won't follow up on any of the scientific information that my colleague just presented, so I don't know enough about that. But I think this should have been really a non-controversial issue, in my opinion. Unfortunately, it got escalated. But I think the appropriation, as saying that this was misrepresented in the media, I believe the appropriation of the 1.2 million was over the biennium. You take that in half, that's where the report of the 500-some thousand dollars was. And that's, so it was accurate, it was just presented in a way that could have been confusing.
Great, thank you, Representative Grishella.
This, this bill is probably going to be one of the highlights of the session. This was, it just really snowballed. We ended up putting little milk cartons on our desks and putting a slot in them so people could come by and put money in Milk for Kids. But it did get a little out of hand. However, the way it was presented in some schools is that there'd be a classroom full of, say, 20 kids, and the ones on the lower income level, they get covered through other programs, and in the higher income, they can afford to hire their own. So you've got 1 or 2 kids in a class who he has to sit there while the other kids have a milk or juice. So that's the way it was. It was kind of a sad situation. I don't know how true it was, but the idea, well, Fargo and West Fargo, you know, the PTAs make up the funding, so the kids get all the kids get their milk or juice. But it was an attempt to make up for this, and I think the bill was well intended, and it did get a little out of control. We did have a caucus fundraiser though, and we did raise, I think, around $900, which we donated to the Milk for Kids program that we started up. So some good came out of it, and I think it'll have some good things that'll happen towards the end.
All right, thank you. We're going to take a short break and start again at 10:30.
That's over the water.
everyone wants to start getting settled back in, we'll start up again here.
Sounds like we could have a fun filibuster next week if we wanted to.
Sounds like it.
I honestly want, I want to understand the bill more, I really don't. I clearly don't.
Don't filibuster, I want to be home Wednesday night.
No, what?
Don't filibuster, I want to be home Wednesday night.
I don't know, Becker might have to get up and talk to the side of the mic while feet up.
Yeah, jeez.
Well, I told him, 'cause I told him, I can't remember who I told, I think I was Tony. I'm gonna tell Rick too, because I like him, I was like,
Where's the separation?
Lewis lived on Bull Rock, and, what was the other one in Seatbelt? Not because I don't understand where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Because he spent 5 times more time saying it than he needed to. This
Or Wall and
mumbling.
John Wall and
It's
Clark
a
Williams.
stylistic thing that, and he doesn't,
Oh,
you gotta know who you are.
absolutely. Appreciate it.
And, it's basically the same spiel twice.
We'll just wait another minute for Senator Axnes.
Thanks, everybody.
Last one here gets the first question.
And only about House bills.
And just a reminder, if you have a question to ask, you can get a card from Bev there. Okay, I think our, starting up again, our first question goes to Representative Hansen. Do you support legislation that's been introduced to impose new voting restrictions, including requiring a photo ID and limiting early voting?
Thank you. No. And we have about 4 or 5 bills that have been introduced to the legislature now. I'll try and break them down briefly. We're gonna, one takes early voting by mail down from 40 days down to 20 days. Another allows the counties, which are currently allowed to vote early on locations. What this means is, what we do it at the hotels here in Cass County, from 15-day window to a 8 or a 7-day window. We are taking down, what was the other one? We had an absentee ballot, we have early voting, and then we have a hog house bill that would have taken, it was residency from 30 days to 70 days, and that was changed to showing a voter ID. I'm opposed to all of these bills for the simple reason, broad reason that every system that they address does not currently have problems being reflected in it, and there are solutions looking for problems. And let me be very clear, we are not talking about voter fraud. We are not talking about false signatures. We are not talking about anything which has any instances on record from either the Secretary of State or county auditors of having any problem in the state of North Dakota. The stated reasons for reductions in early voting by mail and by the counties are in order to assure a more educated populace by a shorter election period for candidates. Candidates will not campaign for a shorter period of time due to this. I believe Heidi Heitkamp and Rick Berg mutually assured us of this last year. B, we are not going to get a more educated voter populace simply because we reduce their amount of their ability to a ballot box. C, you do not have the right as a legislator to declare who is an educated voter or who isn't. It is not our place. It is their right and their duty as voters to become educated. These are unnecessary bills, and I do hope they do not get passed.
Thank you. Senator Flackel.
Well, I think, we've had most of these bills are essentially on the House side. And I think it's always good to look at these things because certainly we've never had a problem of any significance with getting people to sign up for initiated measures until recently. So I think these are good discussions to have. There's a bill that I think on the Senate side related to affidavits, which I think it's okay if they have to prove later on that they are who they say they were, if they don't have any ID. We have them, you have to present ID if you go buy a can of beer. You have to go, show your ID if you buy a pack of cigarettes. So I don't know that this is necessarily that much of a burden on people to be able to do one of the greatest things you can do in America. The expanding the time where people can vote. Originally I think some of it was a matter of convenience. We have one of the most favorable systems in the country, I think, in terms of that. It was thought maybe it would help clean up dirty politics, the old 11th hour drop in at the end, and certainly in at least my race and in the U.S. Senate race and others, that did not occur. That hasn't helped it in any appreciable manner. So that one is still a discussion point. But there, there has to be somewhat of a end on how long those should be stretched out. Those campaigns should be stretched out too, in terms of when they can vote, because you don't want them voting on the primary or the same day they're voting for the general election.
Thank you, Senator Axness.
Thank you. It's been reported that we have one of the best and open election cycles and laws in the nation. And this is one of those things that if it's not broke, then why are we attempting to fix it? And I think I speak for everybody up here when we say that we are honored to represent the good people of this state. But then we have some members that are turning around trying to limit their ability to make good public policy changes through the ballot box. So anything that's adding an additional barrier to getting either people voting or doing an initiated measure, anything like that, I am opposed to, because there just hasn't been instances of voter fraud. So just to be, I guess, straight, yeah, I'm vehemently opposed to the actions that I've seen in the House when it comes to voter voting.
Thank you, Representative Grishella.
I'll chime in and say I'm also opposed to any of these bills that will limit voters' rights, and it is a right to be able to vote, and we don't want to restrict that. This is a nationwide trend of trying to restrict some of the way people vote in this country. My county auditor sent out emails saying he was opposed to these bills. 1400, the one that would limit the early voting, cut in half. There was no reason, again, none of the county auditors or attorney general, they all testified against the bill. And the other one, 1475, would get rid of the poll checkers being able to watch or vouch for voters. In North Dakota, most of the time the poll checkers may know half the people that come through, and this bill would not allow them to vouch for somebody that they knew who they were, that they were who they say they were. So all these bills were an attempt to try to restrict voting, and most of the problems, I think, would have been on the reservations. And that seemed to come out in committee, is that those are the people, a lot of them, that don't have identifications and that type of thing. So fortunately, I think they're all going to go down, but it was good to look at them and find out that we do have a good voting system in our state.
Thank you, Representative Beadle.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by saying that obviously the right of the voter to be able to go and cast their ballot in support of any individual or any measure that they want is something that does need to be protected. And we do have quite a bit of legislation that's all geared at looking and studying and modifying the election process. The ones that shorten the time period in which people are allowed to vote is something that I have a lot of hesitancy towards. Currently we go by federal standards with military ballots for absentee ballots, where for military ballots we have to have those ballots available 46 days prior to the election day. Our state makes it available for everyone 40 days out. And in the past we've taken significant leaps to make sure that people are able to vote as easily as possible, including making it so that for absentee ballots you can request an absentee for any reason whatsoever. Now, this has led to some lengthening of campaigns. This has led to some issues, but for the most part, we have a fairly good system. Now, there are some issues, though, with the affidavit process. And in Cass County, or as a statewide, we saw affidavits jump significantly. And that's when you go to the polling place and you sign a little piece of paper saying, I promise this is who I am. In Cass County in particular, we jumped up. We now have had 9,300 people sign affidavits in this last election cycle. And that makes a lot of people uneasy, especially when you look at what the Secretary of State's process is for following through with those affidavits, which is if an affidavit is signed, the Secretary of State sends a postcard to that residence. And as long as that postcard doesn't come back to the Secretary of State's office, we assume it's good. And that's not something that gives you a whole lot of confidence that it's being a thoroughly vetted affidavit process. And that's where I tend to support the voter ID bill. And one of the biggest reasons why is because we've added an appropriation on there so that if you don't have an ID readily available, we'll give you one for free. Because we want to make sure that you are who you say you are and that people are not disenfranchised to vote. And that overcomes the biggest hurdle to doing that.
Thank you. All right. The next question goes to Senator Flacco. We have a number of questions here on property tax relief, so I'm going to combine a couple of them. One asks, in property tax relief, what is more important, temporary relief or long-term reform? And then what do you think will be the outcome of property tax relief at the end of the session?
Well, we're going to do something significant for both property tax relief and income tax relief before the end of the session. Also, having said that, I think let's not lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of support, and rightly so, for homestead tax credits. Yesterday, the Senate passed a homestead tax credit to help those on limited incomes stay in their homes for a longer period of time. It increased the person's availability or ability to have some income, and it's tiered according to their income up to $42,000, and every $40,000 or $4,000 lower than that, it reduces the amount. It starts at 20% at $40,000, and then it increases as it goes down. Every $4,000, you pick up 20% more that they'll cover. I think that's vitally important. Also, they can have more assets than they used to be able to have, and that's an important thing, particularly with the value of people's holdings in their homes. So something major will come out of that. I've been a proponent of House Bill 1319, which I'm a sponsor of, so I can say that, I guess, that would really bring down in a major fashion the amount of property taxes so that it would be as introduced at 50 mills. It's been kind of bouncing around for the past many hours in the House Appropriations Committee as far as how many mills that might be, and stay tuned on that one. It should be out the next day or so, hopefully. But that would then again ensure that the schools have the money that they need for academic success, and still it would give them, you know, one of the things that makes them a little nervous is then we've kind of given them what they've wanted for many years, that we provide the lion's share of funding. And because of that, that would really limit the ability to raise them on a dollar basis like they've done in the past. So that is one way that would address the second part of the question in terms of, because I don't know it's necessarily espoused to the cap philosophy. They're elected just like we are, and oftentimes with many more votes than we are.
Thank you. Senator Axness.
Well, yesterday, the Senate passed Senate Bill 2036, which actually, it is one of those temporary fixes where the person's primary residency receives up to a $1,125 in reduction, or 50% of the taxable valuation, $403 million for mill levy buy-down, and $341 million to property tax relief sustainability fund. Again, that's the temporary one. To the first part of the question, I do actually kind of favor some long-term reforms. You know, looking at the evaluation process, looking at special assessments. I know part of my district is getting bombarded by special assessments to keep up with the infrastructure, so I think that's something that we really need to look at. We need to make sure that we're doing this in a way that the localities are still able to fund the things that they need, you know, when it comes to schools, when it comes to fire departments, et cetera. This is something that I think is going to be in front of us and discussed for a number of years, in a number of sessions. And I think it's good and it's healthy, and we need to keep everybody engaged at the local level and at the state level. One thing I will mention that I was kind of disappointed about in the passage of Senate Bill 2036 is we didn't include a renter's tax credit in there. You know, from personal experience, I rented the first 8 years I lived in Fargo. While the property was getting tax reduction, rents were still going up. Over half of my district are renters, so I would like to have seen us do a little bit more to include them in this property tax relief plan.
Thank you. Representative Grishella.
When I ran in first election in 2006, Representative Mary Ekstrom said, you know, we're talking about going door to door is my first time, and she made, there were things getting tossed around of what were going to be the bullet points for campaigning, and I went door to door to a few places up by NDSU in my district, and I remember there was two older ladies that lived side by side in two houses, and they were getting ready to sell their houses, and I asked them why they were moving, and they said because they happened to both be out in the yard, and they said because we can't pay our property taxes. They keep going up and up and up every year, and we're on a fixed income, Social Security, and we're going to have to sell our homes. So that became my, my bullet point right there, that when I went door to door, I'm going to do and put my emphasis on property tax relief. Well, we did make in 2007, and I won't take all the credit for it. Well, maybe I will. It's kind of like putting oil in the ground. You know, I'll take a little credit, like everybody else does. But we did put, I think, 110 million that first session into property tax relief. But of course, what happened was the taxable evaluations go up. And then people, even now, they accuse me of, I thought you were doing something about property taxes. Well, you know, we did. We put, you know, a couple $100 million into property tax relief, but they don't see it on their statement. So yesterday, we heard a bill that would, in fact, just make it really clear on your tax statement what came out of a property tax reform. And we all know we don't pay our taxes in mills. We pay our taxes in dollars. So that bill is to, I can't remember the number of it, but that bill will specify right in there exactly how much money the state put into property tax reform and make it really clear. So I think that's a good move. The people need to know that we're actually are doing something in that regard.
Thank you. Representative Beadle.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, property tax, we knew this was going to be one of the biggest issues going into this session, just like it was one of the biggest issues we had last session. It's something that we continue to work with. And we obviously need to give political subdivisions the flexibility to fund programs that they need to fund. I mean, we mandate many things coming from the state level, education being one of them. And so the locals need to make sure that they're funding that appropriately. The problem that we've run into, and the problem that many citizens are frustrated with, is property tax as a dollar amount has been increasing at a fairly rapid pace. And it's to the point where, just like Representative Groeschel said, many of our elderly are having to sell their homes because they can't afford to pay the rising cost of their property tax. And so we're looking at many different issues in this session to try to address that and to try to provide some clarity for one, and to also provide some relief and reform for two. Yesterday, one of those clarity pieces passed the House. I had the opportunity to carry it to the floor. And what it did was it stated the property tax relief line item on your property tax statement and gave you the last 2 years comparison as well. Because what Cass County did that, but the 52 other counties aren't. And what it does is it says that, okay, last year you paid this much dollar amount in property taxes and the legislature contributed this dollar amount. This time you're paying this much, legislature is paying this dollar amount share of your property taxes. And what it allows people to see is, okay, I paid $1,800 last year, I'm paying $2,000 this year, but it says that the legislature paid $400 in here. Why is that getting eaten up? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide clarity so you can see, you know, the line items of where your property taxes are actually being affected, so people see that the legislature is doing stuff. Because a lot of people don't remember, we put $340 million into property tax relief last year. This time we're going to get closer to $700 million in property tax relief this biennium. So we're going to continue to work to buy down, but we need to make sure that we're not just pouring money into a hole without shoring up that hole somewhere else. So we need to make sure we have long-term sustainability into it, and that's where we've got a dozen bills working to solve that.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you. And I think the original question was about the long-term versus temporary fixes. Obviously, I'd be in favor of a long-term program. I think anybody asked that question would be. As Senator Axnes mentioned, we share a district, and there's an old Bill Clinton line about feeling your pain. Well, no, never mind my district. I literally feel your pain. Constant special assessments coming into my mailbox, and I pay it as part of my mortgage every month. So I do understand very well what all my constituents are going through. From my understanding of previous sessions, the legislature has passed, as Representative Groeschel and others have mentioned, property tax relief, some in the hundreds of millions, that has bought back mills that are what we use as a tool to levy said property taxes. The problem psychologically, I think, with a lot of constituents and residents in North Dakota right now is that the assessment of their homes has increased to the point where that should be a good thing, and it is. But it offsets these mills that are bought back. So when the legislature talks about giving these sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars of property tax relief, it feels like phantom dollars to them. Whether it came out of the state or the local mills, it doesn't matter. They pay it every month. And so we need to restructure our system in such a manner so that we're not just pouring money into a black hole, so that perhaps the mills or the way that we rely on property taxes isn't quite so significant, because it is inherently a regressive tax that tends to be levied more on senior citizens, those on fixed incomes, those who have paid off their homes and are now feeling like they're paying a whole nother home, but except for they're not getting any equity for it, and discourages potential first-time homeowners from moving out of the apartment into their first home. I would also like, my time is short, but I do want to concur with Senator Axness that a renter's credit is a good idea, not just for this, and for the reasons he stated, and because those kinds of dollars that go back, it's presented as an income tax, go back into their pocket. They're the kind of people that spend that money almost immediately. It goes to sales tax, goes to having a healthy commerce around your area. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next question will start with Senator Axness, and it is regarding a Senate bill, but the representatives are welcome to respond as well, and I'll read the question. Senate Bill 2303 recently passed in the Senate by a narrow margin. It amends the North Dakota Criminal Code to define a person as an individual member of the species Homo sapiens at every stage of development. One of the significant concerns that has been raised about this legislation is that this will be challenged in the court system and will result in a lengthy and expensive legal battle. Can you please respond to that question?
Sure. That bill actually, I believe, was before the Senate twice, and I voted against it twice for reasons. First off, I am a man. I'm not a woman. I don't know the amount of consideration or heartache that goes into that. I don't think I should be making that decision, nor should I be mandating it and be half of the state of North Dakota. When it goes to litigation, and it most certainly will, we actually tried putting an appropriation on that bill in the Senate, on the Senate floor. It was defeated. So we don't know how we're going to be funding the court case. It's going to be very drawn out. You know, I think there's been other states that have done this, and it hasn't succeeded in any of those states. So it's difficult to see it again here at this point in time in the Senate. You know, it's very controversial language in the bill. It impacts everybody. It's one that's not to be taken lightly, but we'll see where we go forward. Like I said, this will, I'm sure, be in the Supreme Court, at least in the state. I don't know what the financial impact will be, but it'll be burdensome on the state.
Thank you, Representative Grishella.
Thank you. Yeah, we've heard similar bills like this in the past, and I think the major arguments are that it may affect in vitro, it may be contrary to federal law, it will end up in litigation. We'll probably get, Attorney General will be defending lawsuits. I think he's possibly going to work on putting a fiscal note on it because it's going to be expensive to defend. So I think this is left, you know, these type things are best left up to the doctor and the people involved and not to government. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Beadle.
Thank you. 2303, which is the personhood bill, for those that don't know the actual bill number, is a piece of legislation that failed. It passed the House last time, but it failed the Senate. This time it's passed the Senate, and with all likelihood will pass the House. Personally, I'm opposed to this bill for a few reasons. One, the bill is a direct target on abortion, and we know full well as we vote for this bill that it's going to just result in a court case that's going to get defeated, because the personhood legislations haven't been able to pass any other state, and with strong likelihood it's not going to be able to overturn Roe v. Wade. Our Attorney General has hesitations about that. That's why he's been trying to get the fiscal note added on there to actually defend it, because it is going to have some issues. My personal biggest problem with this personhood bill is with the issue of in vitro fertilization, because there's a lot of gray area there that can really limit a couple that has fertility issues and limit their ability to conceive. And personally, I have a few cousins that are only here because of in vitro fertilization treatments. And so, you know, it's really an issue that I think is going against the actual, it's not something that I think is overall good legislation or good policy, although I do sympathize with those people that are working to end abortion. Because nobody up here is pro-abortion. But what we do want to do is we want to make sure that we need to fund childhood services, we need to fund prenatal care, we need to fund early education services in order to help these children that are going to be coming into this world, as well as we need to make sure that health care is available for the parent and going through the pregnancy cycle. So I mean, there's a lot of other things that we need to go at, and this is unfortunately a silver bullet that I don't think is something that's going to actually result in a good end goal.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you. We haven't seen this in the House yet. As Representative Beal mentioned, it will come there. It will in all likelihood pass, and I will be voting against it. I feel the bill has some extreme language in it, including what has been previously referenced. Well, it's going to be a lot of repetition, but it is government involvement in pregnancies and family planning in a woman's body that I do not feel that I, as a legislator, need to legislate, or excuse me, I should not legislate. It does include essentially a ban on from the destruction of embryos or zygotes or ovum that are fertilized, of in vitro fertilization. We had Senator Grabinger of Jamestown have his 17-year-old daughter come and testify against the bill. She is the first IVF baby in North Dakota's history, I believe. And she, I think, presented a pretty solid case to them as a living, breathing 17-year-old girl who was the only way, who was only able to be produced for that family by IVF. I don't think we should be getting involved in people's and very personal choices like this. I voted consistently that way in my time in the legislature. And I do feel that if we are going to do this, and if we are going to talk about this, then we do need to provide a state expenditure for some kind of prenatal care. If you're going to be what is called pro-life, then you need to put your money where your mouth is and vote for probably a single-payer universal health care coverage for that prenatal baby that our society would be helping to take care of, as you are, as the government, telling the woman with that embryo that she needs to have that said child. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Flackel.
Well, a lot of it's been covered, so I'll try to not be too repetitive, but, you know, there's no doubt this will result, and it's going to pass the House, I believe, that it will result in it going to court. I've heard of at least 4 organizations that are planning to challenge it in court. It's a similar piece of legislation has already been, excuse me, ruled unconstitutional in Oklahoma. There was an amendment, as stated earlier, for $1 million to help defray the cost of the court or the case or cases in this matter, because it will cost us money. And the irony of it is that if we do lose, we will have to likely pay the court costs of the other side, which is an interesting piece of irony. I did hear on probably 8-to-1 or 9-to-1 ratio of the people that are in my district that are opposed to the bill. Generally, the message is that they believe it's very anti-family. If it were to pass, it would essentially push everything out of state. I believe, you know, the large hospital in Fargo and others would move out of state, which would again cost more for families to have the process done, which I think now is, you know, $16,000 to $18,000 or more just so they can try to have a child. You know, one of the benefits of the bill right now is in Section 4, though, that requires some coverage of the mother for some of the the mother to provide for some of the medical costs that they may incur. We're still in court on, I think it was the House bill from last session, I can't remember the number exactly, that we passed last session. So these things will likely go to court and will just act in a negative fashion.
All right. Thank you. The next question, we go to Representative Grishella. two questions in here. What is your position on increasing the oil extraction tax as well as the water tax? And that refers to House Bill 1398.
I would assume that the question was of decreasing the oil extraction
Sorry.
tax. Okay, I haven't heard anybody want to raise it. There is some sort of a movement, and we don't, I guess we can suppose where it's coming from, but that lowering the oil extraction tax would be a good thing for North Dakota. And ours is, our taxes, extraction and the production taxes total are one of the higher ones. However, there was an analysis done with a Bakken well in Montana and one in North Dakota, and the effective tax rate in North Dakota was a little lower than Montana and a little lower than a couple of other states. So our tax really isn't that far out of line. The short answer is I'm not opposed to lowering that tax if we have all our needs met in this state. If we have the roads, the infrastructure all in good shape, if we have our schools properly funded, and everything else that we need in this state that's caused by the rapid growth in the West, then we can look at lowering that tax. But for now, I think our focus should be on lowering, or continuing to work on a permanent fix for our property taxes. And if we want to lower that production tax or extraction tax, it's going to cost, over the years, billions of dollars. That 2% that's proposed will cost billions of dollars over the years. So we would never make that up again. The oil is there, it's not going anywhere, and the companies that are using this as a kind of an idle threat, if we don't lower it, we may be moving out of here. That's kind of where it's coming from. The tax we have didn't slow the development at all. They're here and they're going to stay here. So I think it's just a ploy.
Thank you. Representative Beadle.
Thank you. In regards to the water extraction tax, that's one that we haven't had discussion on the floor of the House yet. And it's gone through the Natural Resources Committee, which I don't serve on. So my knowledge on it is limited at this point because we haven't really been able to fully vet it yet. But my initial impression on that one, with adding a tax just for the industrial pull of water, I've got some hesitations there because I don't see the actual need for it. But again, I haven't heard the testimony either in favor or against it, so I'll hold reservation on it. In regards to the oil extraction tax, though, currently, all taxes considered, we have about an 11.5% rate, which the net effective tax rate becomes one of the highest in the country. Over the last few years, Representative Groeschel is absolutely right. It hasn't really done much to slow down or deter the construction or the drilling of new wells, although over the last about quarter and a half, we have seen a decrease in the number of rigs that are actually drilling new wells in the state right now. So, but on the whole, it hasn't really hindered our growth. But one of the things that the current tax structure is seeking to do is trying to eliminate some of the triggers that are in there. Because right now, if oil drops below a certain dollar level, then the tax basically goes away, and so they're paying a significantly reduced rate and everything. And it's a really convoluted method that over the last 25 years has been kind of piecemealed together through 50 different pieces of legislation that's all kind of added into a really convoluted process. So Senator Cook is trying to seek to kind of streamline that, and he's the prime sponsor of the oil tax restructuring. And so that's kind of the ultimate goal, and it's making it so that, after 2017, so not right away, but after 2017, stripper wells will have a 2% tax reduction. Doesn't have any effect on the current wells right now, because you're absolutely right, and what the other Representative Groeschel stated was right. We need to make sure that we are funding our infrastructure, we're funding our education, we're making sure that we get all of these services, but long-term sustainability, we might need to look at eliminating a lot of these triggers down the line to make sure that goes in the future.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you. As far as water extraction tax goes, I'm a maybe. Let's take a look at it. I want to see what the committee comes up with. They're still banging it back and forth. There is something we need to do with our use of water and how we're paying that and assessing getting the money back to oil-producing counties. So let's take a look, but I'm not supportive, or I'm not 100% supportive or against. As far as the oil extraction rate, Representative Beal and others have referenced we're at about 11% right now. And I do think it's interesting, we have to have some talk about oil companies up and leaving if our tax rate is too high, or if price per barrel gets down below a certain level. It's at about 94 right now. But I do find it interesting that two of the other most oil-producing states, I just looked up, Oklahoma and Texas, have 7% extraction rate respectively. Texas has 7.5. Oklahoma has 7 if you're over a certain dollar amount, but it has to be $2.10 for MCF. And a lot of theirs is actually at $4 extraction, 4% extraction rate. And yet, we've had the last 5 years in which three at least major oil companies, along with several other medium to small ones, have all come and made North Dakota their home. They came here because there was oil, not because of the tax environment for oil. This is a geological issue. And I do want to emphasize that if we do want to reduce this tax on those companies, which is something we can take a look at, if we make sure that the funding for the rest of our state is not being heavily relied upon on oil extraction rates, which it currently is. We've reduced taxes, we've reduced burdens on North Dakotans on income levels, we've reduced corporate income tax, we've thrown a lot of money at property tax, and a lot of that money is coming from oil extraction rate. If we get rid of that, we take away one of the tools in our toolbox to assess a rapidly growing population out west, a school system that we need to continue to fund and make more dynamic, and trying to keep kids and families here in the state. So let's make sure that we, at the very least, have offset that, and let's make sure we have some comparisons and context before we do any of that cutting.
Thank you, Senator Flacco.
Well, on the oil extraction tax, I think what we're trying to find is some common ground where it maybe could become revenue neutral, because there's a different rate for when they first get into the and start the drilling and start bringing the oil out in the first portion of the cycle. And then when they transition into stripper wells, so to speak, we have the provision if they produce under 10 barrels a day, they're deemed stripper wells, lower production, so we don't have as much of a tax on them at that point when they've really reached very significant maturity level. There's a push to increase that to 40 barrels or less, and as such, that would really change the dynamics of that. That would be, they'll have to have their selling shoes on to have a lot of support for that, I think, from the people I talked to, at least on the Senate side. With respect to the water tax, essentially water is deemed either state or federal property, I guess, of sorts. But I'm kind of curious, the rationale for that. It sounds like it's going to go to the general fund, and unless you have a dedicated purpose, it just seems like it's the camel's nose under the tent, where they're going to, roll it in to the general fund this time, and then those counties that are using it, then next time will want it for something specific to their own area, and that gets a little weary of that after a while. One of the things we also need to continue to look at in terms of the fiscal impact is that right now our oil is based upon about a 5% extraction. Only about 5% of the oil is taken out of the ground, leaving 95% still in. I think technology through our university system and others will allow us to really increase that in the next 12 years. So I think we're going to have an increase, which will again give us billions more barrels of oil.
Thank you, Senator Axnes.
Thank you. I guess when it comes to House bill, I think it's 1398, the water bill. I haven't heard anything about this bill, so I can't really speak to it, but I do know that they say whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. So I imagine that it's a contentious bill, especially when it involves different entities, whether it's local, state, federal, and the quality of the water. So like I said, I can't really speak to that bill. As for the extraction tax bill, 2336, I think we're going to be taking up a rigorous debate on that before crossover. I actually think it might be Monday that'll be on the Senate floor. And, this is the same argument that was being used the last session, that if you don't reduce the tax on us, we're going to up and leave. We didn't reduce the tax then, and the oil production continued to set records. So I can't buy that argument this time either. My understanding is from the people I've talked to who are on the committee that this is going to reduce it basically 2%, 11 to 9%. And as was been stated up here, the needs are still there, and if we're relying right now so much on this tax, and we are reducing others, and then we reduce this one. We're kind of shorting ourselves for future growth and development. And like I said, I can't buy the argument that this is going to hinder if we don't reduce this tax, because I haven't seen it historically. So I will probably be involved in the debate tomorrow. I guess it'll be interesting.
Thank you. I believe the next question's to Representative, starting with Representative Beadle. What's your position on funding statewide early childhood education services?
Well, as I kind of indicated in one of my answers earlier, early education services are something that's vital to our state and is for the good of the growth of the individual as well as our system. Our new superintendent of public instruction, Kirsten Baszler, has been an adamant supporter of the Head Start program, for one, and the preparedness that it provides for the students and the success that they see as a result of it. When you've got somebody who's as dedicated towards ensuring that our children are best served as that, strongly fighting forward, it's really hard to come up with the great arguments against it, because our children really are one of the best investments that we can make, both in our K-12 education, our early education, as well as our higher education, making sure that we have that investment into intellect and ensuring that they become best ready for society. And so as far as early childhood education, it's a good place to spend money. It's great to ensure that children are available. And partnered up with that is ensuring that daycare is available, because that's one of the places that children learn heavily is in access to daycare. And so we need to also make sure that we take steps to not just fund the pure educational component, but also make sure that we have children working with, just individuals that are monitoring them during the day while the parents are at work, but two, providing them with the social interaction and the education that you see at that level as well. So I definitely am a supporter of early childhood education as well as education across the board.
Thank you, Representative Hansen.
Thank you. I'm for it. Seems to have some bipartisan support, so let's keep moving forward with it this session.
Thank you, Senator Flackel.
We had the one bill, Senate Bill 2229, in our committee, in the Senate Education Committee. It passed out unanimously. It came out split vote on the Senate Appropriations Committee. But I think it'll be a bill that will, I feel, whose time has come. It allows for local dollars to be used for early childhood programs. They can use that if they want for at-risk population, where we've really seen some dramatic data. You know, we've challenged them to say, give us the data, give us the data, give us the data. And now we've been in it to a point now with whether it's the tiny turtles up in Turtle Lake, to Fargo, to Bismarck, Devil's Lake, down even in, I think, in the Linton area. They're all pulling together a lot of data that was pulled together in the last, or released in the last 7 to 10 days, that does show significant improvements that continue on as we move forward throughout the grades. You know, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and beyond. So I think the data is there that shows it. For the North Dakota solution, I'm much more in favor of a North Dakota solution than some kind of a federal mandated type program that would do that. I think we have the ability to solve and understand North Dakota very well. I think it will pass the Senate. And then the House will have it for their consideration. It has $4.6 million in it, and like I said earlier, it also includes some provisions for local funds to be used.
Thank you, Senator Axness.
Yes, and following up on Senator Flackel, 2229, as you mentioned, the committee that he chairs, it did come out unanimous, do pass for the Head Start program. Went over to appropriations, and it was a split vote, and they are recommending a do not pass, so we will be working hard on the floor together to make sure that this important piece of legislation does become a reality, and at least until it gets to the House side, then it's out of our control. But, you know, these are those programs that absolutely need the state support behind. We're one of the few states that don't provide support for a Head Start, and here in Fargo alone, the waiting list is unacceptable for kids that need placement, that need that assistance to get to where they're on the level playing field, so when kindergarten starts, they're able to learn just as rapidly as their classmates are. And you know, this early intervention, and I guess I shouldn't say intervention, this early education really diminishes the likelihood of problems in the future when it comes to dropout rates, when it comes to employment, when it comes to incarceration rates. This, in my opinion, minuscule amount of money that we're able to put up front to address this issue is going to save money in the long run for the corrections and for unemployment and for the benefit program. So yeah, I'm going to be working hard to make sure that we're doing all we can as a state to address early childhood education.
Thank you. Representative Grishella.
Thank you. Yeah, I was surprised when this bill 2229 came out, 9-4 do not pass out of Senate appropriations. So obviously there is some, there's a faction someplace that doesn't think this is a good idea. But my wife's been a teacher, elementary teacher in North Dakota for 30-some years, and there's absolutely all the evidence we need that investing in our youth, the younger the ages, the better, is going to be a very good investment. There's no better investment we can make. As mentioned, the fact that they're going to have less problems in life, less problems when they grow up, and less dependent upon other programs, there's just no doubt about it. So we're as a caucus, we're fully committed to pre-K or the early childhood education.
Thank you. We're going to go to closing statements here, 2 minutes each. We'll start with Representative Hansen. We did have a question that if the legislators want to explain their top 3 issues they're working on, you're welcome to incorporate that if you would like. We'll begin with Representative Hansen.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's
Closing.
Closing it, okay.
If you want to answer that question.
Oh, you bet. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for being here and taking your time out of your Saturday to come listen to us speak. It's an honor and a privilege representing all of you, and something I do try and do is answer every email I get on issues, especially any from my district, and I've been putting in some long hours on weekends just making sure that everybody, at the very least, gets a response. It's fun in North Dakota when you have such a small state. You're able to interact with most of the major players on a bill, or most of the major groups that are for or against the bill. Communication stayed open very nicely, and I just encourage everyone in the audience to keep writing, keep talking to us. I see members of the audience who I've had email interactions with, whether we agree or disagree. I'd just encourage you to keep them coming. As far as the top 3 issues that I can do a top 3 issues that I think the legislature is working on. I don't presume as a freshman to be working on them so directly myself, I guess. And those would be property taxes, infrastructure, and making sure that we have a vision for the future of our state that encourages growth, not just in a short term, not just in a boom time, not just because of, as I was stating earlier, a geological reason, but because of smart planning and smart people, making sure that we increase our earning power, increase our education, increase our desirability as a place where people can move to, can start raising a family. We see all of these, very mistaken folks that live on coasts that are starting to realize that their cost of living and their infrastructure isn't keeping up, and we just want to encourage them to please come here and make your home and increase the amount of jobs and revenue and tax base we have, and hopefully enjoy some of the quality of life that we do. So thanks very much for being here, and I look forward to talking to any of you afterwards if you have any individual questions for me.
Thank you. Senator Flacco.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and for you for hosting. And it is informative for us, too, because this way we can kind of catch up what's going on in the House, too, because when we're doing our thing in the Senate side, they're doing their thing in their rooms on the House side. 3 things are always tough to do, but certainly we're going to, when we did a survey of our district, property tax and income tax relief really ranks up high. For me, serving on the Senate Education Committee, it's vitally important that we, have improved funding mechanisms for both higher education and K-12. And one of the bills that is near and dear to me, which may not be to everyone else, but that's the way the legislature goes, is the Humane Treatment of Animals bill, because that's important in a lot of circumstances. We've seen in the paper, particularly in the Bismarck paper, what things can happen. But, again, it's a one-to-one relationship. I remember in about the 2003 session, we had a lady who knocked on my door one Sunday afternoon and said, I want you to consider this bill. Her son has maple syrup urine disease. If they did not get supplement, which cost them $3,000 a month, the child would would have mental retardation and possibly die. They could not afford to do that. Not a big bill in the scheme of things, but what we have to remember as legislators, that was the biggest bill for that lady and her husband. And I mean, you will, when you get things like that, you will go to the wall. That's like we heard some of the most compelling testimony I've ever heard on the DUI legislation, Senate Bill 2240. That is also vitally important. So we're fighting on a lot of different fronts, and they really are all important in a comprehensive and strategic plan as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Axness.
Yeah, well, I want to thank everybody for coming today too. It's good to see a fairly full room of people that are engaged and interested in what we are and what we are not doing out in Bismarck. And I want to thank the League for hosting us and for inviting this discussion. We're halfway there almost, 34 days out of 80. There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot that might be roadblocked from being done. So I just encourage everybody to stay tuned and follow the media, follow us on Facebook. I think a majority of us probably have some sort of social media that we try to update regularly. I guess when it comes to priorities, I want to say the number one priority that I have working on is making sure the North Dakota I inherited is there for future generations. Our quality of life when it comes to hunting, fishing, the recreation, and making sure our quality of care and our education system are all maintained and advanced education when it comes to quality and access, from pre-kindergarten, as we talked about briefly today, all the way through higher education. Protecting our children and families, making sure that programs are available, like one that Senator Flacco just mentioned. A lot of those types of challenges come before me and the Human Services Committee. And the group of people out in Bismarck are mostly working towards the betterment of addressing those challenges. So, that's what I intend to keep doing, but we need to hear it from the constituents. What are the challenges that you see that we might not be seeing, especially when you're 3 hours away in a tall building? So I just want to thank everybody again, and keep the conversation alive with us, please.
Thank you. Representative Grishella.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting, and for all of those in the audience here. It's nice to look at some smiling faces. We don't see those too often in Bismarck. I think North Dakota is in a very unique position right now. The governor's using the axiom now. He says, let's make our future together. Well, we are creating our own future right now. We are very unique, and we hear that every day, that we're not like other states. We've got, we're in a good position. Oil development, this is the best thing probably that's ever happened to the state. However, it does come with some really serious consequences if we don't handle it properly. And we're getting information all the time about the possibility, or not the possibility, but the pollution, what comes out of those wells, the chemicals that are putting in landfills that leak. And so we have to preserve our natural environment. That's super important. And also, you mentioned the top three, so I won't, I've got a minute left, one more. The DUI thing, the traffic safety has been a passion of mine, of course, with law enforcement background, but I really do hope that the citizens will keep the pressure on. This would never got to where it is if it wasn't been for the people who were involved in some of these serious fatality crashes, taking the initiative to talk to the governor, they talked to the attorney general, they talked to their legislators, and we've got a couple of pretty good bills now, and I think we actually make some headway. So for those of you in the audience, we know that the state email system is clumsy. It's hard to access bills and to keep track of where they're at, but there is a bill tracking system on there. But once you figure it out, isn't that bad? But stay in touch and keep contacting us and let us know your feelings, and that's where we get most of our drive, and we need your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Beadle.
Thank you, Jolene. As far as the three biggest issues that I'm working on in this legislative session, or that us as a collective body are working on this legislative session, obviously some of them have been talked about, but kind of where my focus has been is we need to make sure that one, property tax as well as education funding. I mean, that's obviously a biggest issue. That Measure 2 back in last June kind of showed us that, so we need to continue to work to come up with some real relief as well as some reform mechanisms within that. Two, we obviously have issues that we need to deal with K-12 funding as well as higher education funding to make sure we have equity and adequacy. We also need to make sure we manage the oil impacts in our state and the growth. But on the whole, we need to make sure that we continue to promote a smart and efficient government. And this is a government that not only realizes the fact that oil's not our top draw, it's not our biggest driver. We've had exports increase 440% since 2000 because ag continues to be number one in our economy. We have a multifaceted economy with tech growth, with biomedical growth. We've got a lot of different areas of our economy we need to continue to grow and continue to perform in so we can consistently be 1 and 2 in national trends, national polls, and national success. And to do that, we need to have a smart and efficient government that uses the taxpayers' money effectively. And so just in closing, that's kind of where I see the big focus and what we need to continue to do. And in order for us to continue that, we need individuals like all of you who came to spend your Saturday morning with us, people that'll end up watching this either online or through local access, and just inform citizens, letting us know what the big issues are, because obviously our top issues might not be your top issues. And so please email us, write us, let us know the big issues important to you, because we really need that input as we're continuing to make legislative policy, because we're here to represent you. So just in closing, thank you, Jolene, thank you to League of Women Voters in the City of Fargo, and all of you for being here. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you. A few things in wrapping up. We want to recognize a few of the other elected officials or dignitaries that were here. I'm not sure if they're all still here. Senator Sorvag, Senator Nelson, Mike Monplaisir, the Cass County Auditor, Jim Johnson from the Fargo School Board. Is there anyone I missed? Okay. Also like to thank the legislators for, did I miss someone?
I think we had a county commissioner here.
Okay.
Gone.
Thank the legislators for spending their Saturday morning with us, the audience for their great questions. I'm sorry that we did not get to all of them. Remind you to remember to leave your pens and extra note cards here. Also, a thank you to the City of Fargo for hosting us, to Jeremy for the League members for helping out this morning, and also reiterate what all the legislators said about encouraging constituents to be in contact with them by email or whatever means. Our next legislative forum is going to be Saturday, March 9th here in the City Commission chambers. And finally, I just want to give everyone a big round of applause for participating today. So thank you.